that people need to be heard, they need to be understood, and so do we.
Hi, welcome to the Like-Minded podcast. Today we again have a really special guest on the show, Piret Koppel, who did her university studies in sports psychology and English literature, and from there on continued her uh, continued her studies in both social work and after that earning her credentials as a psychotherapist. And now she does both social work as a psychotherapist and marriage and family counseling.
Right. Thank you.
I guess the first question to go right into it would be, what does your everyday life look like, or how does your average maybe like work life look like?
Okay. Well, I'm semi-retired now, so I've got a lot more free time than before. And I work in private practice, so I have a home office. I've been working in private practice actually close to 30 years, but when I stopped working, when I retired from social work itself, it was to focus on psychotherapy more and doing therapy with people. It was what was more interesting to me. So my life now is greater ease. I'm 75 years of age. Still enjoy working. I work. I guess I have a specialty in trauma therapy, actually, with people who are survivors of childhood trauma and other types of trauma. I work also with asylum seekers, and many of them have lived through systemic trauma from their home country, and so I maybe work 6 to 8 hours a week, and so if it's more the professional side that you're interested in, that's of today's focus. Other things I do is I read, and I also like to paint and draw. So I have lots of time for friends, for family now, more so now than when I was working professionally, full time.
If a person comes in, then how does a session usually look like? Or for example, if that was my first time meeting with you, what would be the first question you would ask me? Or is it usually that somebody comes with a like very specific problem, or is it something that you kind of have to get out of them?
Usually, when I'll have some contact with the person, actually always by phone. And once I've received the referral from another source, or they've called me, and I ask them what is it that they're looking for, what are the issues that are concerning them, and so when I meet them for our first session, it would be for some background, something getting to know them a little bit, but um, yeah, finding out how they are suffering because of whatever the issue is that they're bringing with them. How is it affecting them in their daily life? And then I listen and, of course, seeking to understand, but also thinking among all of the tools that I have potentially to offer is how can I help them with some to improve their symptoms to a certain degree so they can start to believe that this is actually a helpful um, uh, endeavor for them to, and they almost always do want to continue and our conversations, and we'll book other sessions, um, and listening to them really carefully and also feeling along with what they're telling me. They get a sense that, oh, this is a place that they can talk about things that have been bothering them and perhaps have had nobody to speak with about. So it's a kind of yeah, sort of friendly conversation, but with a focus to find ways to understand the person, have compassion for the person, help the person to have compassion for themselves, and also for look for concrete ways that they can actually um, regulate their own mood, for example, regulate their own physical arousal, their symptoms, somehow to alleviate the distress they're in, if they're highly anxious, or to help elevate their energy level somehow if they're quite depressed. expressed. So there are a lot of things to listen for, and so does that answer your question?
Yes. Are there people who respond worse to therapy, or like what does the outcome of therapy depend on? Is it more on the person coming in or your work?
I, I, th I think it's how they feel. Do they feel understood? Do they feel listened to? Do they feel like somebody is really cares about them, and has compassion for them? I think that's one of the things people are looking for first. Do they feel comfortable? And I will ask them towards the end of the session, the first session, how does that feel for you that you've been here? And they will most often say, I feel some relief. I feel like this is helping me. And that's a good sign. It's a good sign. The person is less defended. Maybe they're feeling they're feeling the relief and a little bit less stress. We're talking increments, right? Depending on the difficulty of the problem, how long the person's been living with it. Um, so, uh, yeah, well, those are my thoughts first to share with you. The outcome of the therapy, so I'd say like it's about 50% does the person feel like they're being heard, and the other part is really the knowledge of have the experience that I bring to the conversations based on what I've learned with other people working around the same issues. Um, there's bad therapy if I'm not listening to them, if I'm imposing something, if I am stressed myself and I'm not so calm enough in myself to be able to hear them well and be responsive to them. If I'm trying, pushing an agenda or a certain technique, I think back on earlier years when I was starting to do this work. If I'm not able to resonate with what they're trying to tell me, either in words or the feeling behind it, then they don't feel heard. And it's very rare that somebody won't come back for a second session or for a course of treatment. Um, but that's an issue. We're not technicians. We can't fix a person's life. They are the experts in their own life, really. And it takes time a little bit to learn the language the person speaks in and to understand what they mean by that. And there's also an intuitive side that comes to it, kind of. I think a lot of therapists maybe don't like to talk about this, but there's a spiritual side. So that if I'm really hearing them, they will feel that. And there's also a kind of subconscious side that if I'm sort of tuned in to what I'm picking up, they can also tune in more to what they want to express. But also, then there's a kind of our subconscious minds are working together as well as our conscious minds. So it becomes quite involving quite quickly. And it feels real and it feels helpful.
How do you think this has changed your everyday life communications, or do you feel like that you take your work role on everywhere you go?
I used to take my work role on everywhere I went, and that was a real detriment both to my own health and to my relationships. So I've learned not to want to fix the other person. I've learned most recently, I'd say in the last few years, really to listen with compassion, listen with my heart rather than my head. I've a very strong kind of a dialogue going on in my mind all the time, analyzing things, thinking that that's going to fix this a situation for myself or others, but it's not the case. Problem solving is one thing. Having compassion for self and others, teaching people to have more compassion for themselves is the route that's the highway I'm on now, rather than the way I would approach it earlier when I understood less.
Does that mean that instead of suggesting changes or how to move forward, you just like empathize or like say that, oh, I'm so sorry, but then you don't suggest what to do next? Or what's the good balance if somebody comes to you with a problem, then how should you respond?
That's an excellent question. It's a bit of both. The if I'm going to pose as the expert in their life, and that's not going to work. But I do need to have some potential, some alternative, how to say, some alternatives. Often, when we have a problem that we've been living with for a while, our attention is narrowed, and we're not taking in all the information about the situations or our own life, right? So our attention is narrowed. There's usually a lot of stress. There's anxiety. We can't hear and think as well for ourselves, and so part of my role is to reflect. Okay, what they're telling me, what they've tried. I do want to know that, and what are the other options potentially when looking from a different perspective. So I am bringing tools to share with them, skills that they can learn themselves as well, and we'll try them out when it's appropriate. So it's both. I'm not trying to fix their lives. I'm trying to help them work to fix their lives to in a way that is more organic, I guess. Does that make sense?
Is it often that people come in and expect you to make big decisions for them?
Mm, rarely, rarely. It's a trap, actually. To if the what would you do if the person asked me what would you do in this situation? Um, I might share some ideas of what possibilities there are. In terms of communication, though, if we're going to talk about couple therapy or families, communication is really important, and there are approaches, there are styles of communication that there there's that can be problematic, and perhaps the person really doesn't know how to talk with a partner, for example, in a way that shows that they're really listening first, that they're really understanding, that they're wanting to learn what's the difference between that person and myself. How can we communicate best where we both hearing each other? Those are skills. Communication skills are lacking sometimes. I find, and that's an area to pay some attention to. So there, I would be a teacher in a way, or say, what kind of effect are you getting when you're approaching the problem or the person the way you've been doing? And if they say, well, it's not really working, say, okay, well, let's look at perhaps here's some suggestions to try.
What about everyday life? At least I feel like I like always ask my family and friends like what would you do? What should I do? Is it like a healthy pattern or should I avoid all of that and just make all of my decisions on my own?
Well, the first one of the things that I pick up with that is that you like to collaborate. You like to talk with other people. You're open to suggestions, and that's a nice opening for a conversation. And I'd say if one actually follows everything that the other person says or suggests, it may not be right for us. So how will one find out, I guess, is based on the results. If we're going to try what the person suggests, okay. Very often people say, oh, I've tried that already. So in other words, they really don't want the suggestions. So we work a little slower.
In your everyday life, because you have a psychotherapy, I mean, you are a psychotherapist, does that mean that you avoid all conflicts, or do you sometimes still argue with with the people around you?
I don't avoid conflicts. Uh,
What,
our,
what,
go ahead.
how do you define a conflict, or how does a conflict look like for you? Because I imagine I don't know anything about your conflicts, but I imagine that they're like civil enough that some people would not consider them conflicts, maybe.
Oh my goodness. Uh, th- I would say maybe, oh my goodness, what to say? Avoidant. I used to be avoidant of conflicts. Not always the best way to go. Another approach I would take is, well, I really know the best solution to this problem, and I'm going to be very intense about presenting my points of view, and this is the way it should be. And I have spent a lot of time telling people what they should do in the past, and I've learned the error of my ways. It's not it's kind of like what often women would complain about with their male partners is you're always trying to fix the problem, but the woman might say, but I really just want you to listen, right? Well, there's so in order for so how to deal with conflict, it's such an important question really at this time, in the times that we're living in, and there's never ever just one way of looking at a situation, Monica. I think the it's really important to find a way where we can really hear somebody else and what they're saying, even if we don't agree with them. Um, that people need to be heard, they need to be understood, and so do we, right? And even so, if one's working, with a couple, both people are going to have a different point of view. Both people are going to want to pull in the therapist to be on their side. But the fact that the kind of position one needs to take is that, oh, they both have a corner on the truth here. Are they hearing each other? If they really heard and understood the other, if they weren't feeling afraid that they are not being heard, or they're being misinterpreted. If there's fear underneath it, one has to allay the fears at first so that people can be more open to hear each other. I tend to believe in collaboration. Um, I really do. I think everybody brings something to the table. Everybody has something to offer in terms of their understanding. And I think we learn best when it's already connected to something we feel is true about ourselves. So conflict, if it's just, one person aggressing the other verbally or in any other way, that's not helpful communication. Some person's need is getting met, the other person's need is not being met. We're looking to see what both people need in the relationship, right? So uh, conflict. First, what I've learned recently is that one really has to be calm in oneself first, right, to be able to express oneself and uh, adequately and to hear others adequately. And then there's a better chance of really recognize what is the issue? What are we trying to fix here?
Do you think it's possible to live a conflict-free life?
No,
No.
no, I don't think so. Well, do I think so? Conflict free, just a second. Um, I think conflicts can be resolved and then we probably meet up with another difficulty later on. So in between there's some peace and there's definite, I do believe that we can have a more peaceful interactions with each other, human beings. Um, but I kind of want to ask you, what do you think? Do you think we can live a conflict-free life? Would that
Mm,
be happiness?
Hmm. I don't know. To some degree, I do think it's possible if you're just like calm enough that you're like resolving everything like on a very logic basis and you don't take emotion in anything that's being said to you or happening around you.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Some people get very far with that and by not taking things personally. So that's a sort of calmer approach, and where one's more secure about oneself, I guess, self-confident. If one is calmer, one is feeling better in oneself, and there's less likelihood of being in conflict with others. I agree with that.
But
Um,
do you think it's good to like emotionally step back sometimes, or is it better if you're like involved emotionally?
I think it's good to step back and then understand one's own emotion first, and then once one settles that, it's easier to hear the other. It's easier to be calm with the other. So there's a process. I agree with you, actually. I think you're right. I'm not sure that a lot of people deal with conflict well, but it is possible to be, as you put it, calmer. I think the emotions inform us as to what is important to us and the other. So there's a depth to this. It may be that a person is presenting themselves in a certain way and it's causing some conflict. And if we're calmer and we can ask ourselves, well, what's underneath that? We can even ask them, what is your need underneath that? What is the emotion that where you're coming from? Because there are unmet needs. And those unmet needs, if we recognize what they are and how they factor into what's playing out in the moment, it can get us perhaps to a conversation that's more productive and um, and uh, and also closer to a solution for whatever that underlying issue is.
How do people learn to not take everything personally always, or sometimes to think like, oh, they're saying that because of something that they're feeling and it's not actually
Yeah.
against me?
It tells me that the person has needs that are unmet, needs for attention, needs to be understood, needs to be considered. It may not be happening. That may not be lacking in the interaction we're having with that person at the time. But if it always goes back to them, that oh, you're doing that because of me, or you're doing that to hurt me, and they don't really see that no, the other person has is that that's not their intention, and that they actually have another intention or another agenda, but the second person can't see it. It tells me that that person has unmet needs, and what one can bring to it, I guess, is compassion for them, but not necessarily engage in the in conversation about the issue, because there's something blocking it, or there's an understanding that's missing. It's not large enough to really be helpful in that moment.
How do you learn to not take everything personally or be calm in situations where it may seem like somebody is attacking you?
I think if that's happening to us, I think we have some individual work to do, to really look to see how come I'm like, first to acknowledge, yeah, that that's how I'm interpreting how that person is with me, and perhaps another person and a third person. The issue may be with me, that I need to know what's underlying that, for that response in myself. There's some inquiry and some growth that is needed, it, because let's say if that's me, that I'm always thinking that I'm taking things personally. I have to question why. When the person tells me, no, I don't mean it that way, and I have to give them, the benefit of the doubt there, and say, well, how come I'm responding this way? If they're truly not manipulative, if that person's not trying to control me in a certain way, and they're actually spending a lot of time to try to explain to me, no, they're not doing that, then I have to take that seriously and into consideration, and say, well, what is it? What is it about me and how I relate to the world that leaves me feeling, leaves me suffering, basically.
Have you ever had a couple come in where you have felt like they should not be together, or where you have felt like, oh, I don't know if there's anything we can do?
Mm, okay. First of all, I guess I'd have to say that I do more work with individuals than with couples. My training as a family couple therapist was very helpful, has been helpful even in individual work, because I realized that our to say using a systemic approach, where we're looking to see how individuals interact, and how the dynamic actually becomes the problem in a way, not the one individual or the other. It's how they're approaching things, and the dynamic that they've been involved in for quite some time, and it's rigid. Um, that's the first thing, I guess, as a couple therapist I would look for. It's not whether they should be together or not. If they decided, or one person has decided they want to leave the relationship, that's a different kind of therapy, or those different sort kind of sessions where the couple, if one decides they don't want to stay together, they're but they have a place to talk about it and the reasons why, then they can actually work towards an amicable, possibly an amicable separation. And that's healthier for both of them in the end. Um, what would lead one to think that they're not compatible? those might be communication issues. They might be power issues or the power imbalance in a relationship. There are a lot of different perspectives one can bring to it to understand. But as a therapist, I would certainly wouldn't say, oh, these people shouldn't be together. I'd want to know what brought them together, right? What is it that, what are the strengths in the relationship? What is the attraction about? Um, in couple therapy, often it'll go, all right, so what are the barriers? And it could well be that, well, that's a conversation in itself, I guess. But one want to understand what the conflicts are, and if there's another way to frame what's going on that they can both buy into, and then explore a little bit to see, are there different ways that they can not better communicate, but better understand each other, and see, is there room for for each of them individually, as well as the couple. Is there enough to nurture them? It's not short-term work necessarily.
What do you feel like is a problem that most people are struggling with right now? Or what is something that like oh like you feel like is maybe something common in each of us that people often struggle with?
Well, there's a lot of grief right now. There's a lot of anxiety and stress because of world events. There's a lot of stress in our society and around the world, I'd say. Uh, there's distress. There's a lot of distress. So people have a lot of anxiety um, about the future, anxiety about even the present. I think it enters, well, just remembering I do work with asylum seekers, so they've got a very uncertain future here in Canada, depending on the process. Like some people are sent back to their country. Not everybody is given a permanent residence, so there's a lot of stress in that situation. Um, I think in among the people that I talk with, not in therapy so much, I don't think they come to deal with their angst about world events and how it's affecting them. But I do see it in relationships and conversations with friends and family. There's a lot of preoccupation with the uncertainty of say, the world order. The aggression that's happening in many places in the world, the pressure in our own society, politically and socially, the threat to the social network that we have in Canada, job losses. There's a lot of, it's troubled times. And people who have others to talk with, people who have a good relationship with partner, family, friends, tend to have, I guess, the best sort of, at least they've got the support in the present. Like a good family life, good relationships really matter and help us through through these difficult times, I think.
Are there any tools you would just suggest people who are listening right now to use when they feel unwell or anxious or
Mm. There are a lot of resources that people can look for. I find that meditation there are many styles of meditation, but there are a lot of somatic techniques that are very helpful in managing stress. And uh, I guess that
how,
people
how
can do.
so sorry for disrupting you, but how do you usually meditate, or how do you like, as a person who like maybe has never meditated, how would you like, what would be like, oh, that's how you, that's one way to start.
Well, mindfulness meditations are really I find compatible, I guess, with our I said with my lifestyle, I guess. Somatic techniques that go together also with mindfulness meditation. It's focused on the breath. It's training for us to become more aware of what's happening in our body. Um, emotionally, physically. Breath is a very important, powerful tool to help us calm ourselves quite quickly. Taking a deep breath in and then slowly releasing, exhaling the breath in and out. This is like a basic, becoming aware of our body, and releasing some of the tensions, which we can do consciously. And if we know how, so that allows us to still our mind to a certain extent. And I'm just a beginner at this. I've only been really learning about meditation the last 3 years, but I'm finding some of the techniques, the breathing techniques, the mindfulness, becoming aware of what's going on in my own body, what my emotions are, and not just what's going on in my mind, allows for a better space to create more space around the emotion, and allows me to be able to think um, more rationally when I'm calm.
Have you ever suggested to somebody that they consider psychotherapy, or is it like a
Yes.
kind thing to suggest, or do people take offense to that? For example, if you go to somebody and suggest, oh, you might need therapy.
I used to say everybody needs therapy. Good question, really, Monica. Ed. Sometimes, yes, when people are really struggling, I find, for example, if people are trauma survivors, there's a lot of things very hard for people to express, and the intensity of their reactions. People in those situations really do need therapy help. They cannot solve it on their own. They need a caring, compassionate other person to help reflect what's going on and also help with emotional regulation, with tools, with validation, with understanding. We can't do that for ourselves when we're in the midst of it. Uh, we really do need somebody who can understand and is skillful enough to be able to help us make good changes in our life. It's when I see people suffering a lot, um, it is. I haven't told friends that, but other friends will or family members will, and that's why I'm still working, because there is a need. When somebody calls and says, I need help with such and such, are you available? So, well, let's talk a little bit and let me see what it is, and I can assess, are they ready? And no, I don't assess if they're ready. I said, yes, you're welcome. Come, we'll work together, and inevitably there is some improvement because there's caring to start with, and there's a desire on the other person's part. If they don't recognize it, then there's no use bringing. Like, very often, young people uh, do not want to go to therapy. Adolescents are troubled. They're brought to a therapist by a friend or whatever, or a parent, and they won't talk. So that has to be respected too. There are periods of time in our lives that I guess we're um, maybe more open to it. It's difficult to see people suffer though. Huh? We do want to help them.
Has it ever been the opposite that somebody comes in and you say, oh, you don't really need therapy? For example, I went into coaching and I just had like one introduction session and the person was like, oh, you seem so happy. I don't think you need help in any ways. So have you ever told somebody that, oh, you don't really need therapy, like you're fine, goodbye?
I've thought that sometimes, and then I've come to understand that, wait a second, this is a good performance the person's putting on. They know they need something, and they may be high. No, this the two categories. There are people who are high functioning in many areas of their lives, but there's still something that is troubling them, and they're looking for some help with that. So I wouldn't tell them you don't need therapy. I'd be curious as to, okay, what's going to help us get to the level of conversation needed for the person to feel safe enough to start talking about what is troubling them. I've heard, I've heard people say, "Oh, you don't need therapy," but I think that's superficial understanding, really, of the person's life. And yeah, so that's for high functioning people. We may think that just having a job or being in school is an indicator that their life is fine and that they have no problems. I think that that's a premature decision to make. if the person's coming, you mentioned this in the previous question. If a person's not dealing with their seriously enough with what's going on in them and they want the other person to fix it for them, that's a kind of, I'd say, an immature stance. And one of the things that I know is we all have parts of selves. We have young parts of selves and we have older parts of selves and specialized parts of selves in, work or school or social situations. But we all have younger selves and there may be needs. We may have been brought up a certain way to believe the other person's always going to do it for me, fix it for me. Well, that's not maturity. So what's missing? I guess one would look to see, okay, how come the person is always kind of relegating the helper or the how to say it, looking for somebody to do it for them? How come they're not enough willing to look to see what they can do for themselves or learn to help themselves? That's kind of a delicate issue, though. Because leaving somebody to do it on their own too soon, they feel abandoned. If the therapist or the friend or the parent does it all for the other person, that's not good either. Because we all have responsibility. We have gifts and we receive gifts from life and people. It's our responsibility to give back in some way. And so that's that reciprocity. If it's not happening, if it's not developing in some way in that person's life, something's missing. It doesn't bode well. It's not a good prognosis. I mean, some developmental work has to be done, perhaps that. But mm,
Did you always know that you wanted to go into psychotherapy?
that's a great question. I knew um, I really wanted to go into English literature. I didn't get good advice from my mom. Unfortunately, she didn't know me very well, but so she recommended I go into science. I don't do math very well. In math and sciences. I was okay in high school, but not university level. And then I wanted to go into English literature. I finally did. I finally got out of university with a BA in English literature because my mother wanted me to go into music. I went to music for a while. I have a sensitivity to music, but I'm not a musician. I don't have the energy. I don't have that kind of, I'm not born to be a musician. So finally went into English literature, finished. I was happy with that, but I was kind of tired. So when I went into work life, I I got the sense that yeah, psychology would be interesting. It was I couldn't get into a psychology department except in the States, and I didn't. I was and that's kind of expensive to be educated in the U.S. So I went to a different route and finally ended up in social work. And I wanted to be a couple and family therapist. And the person there, the consultant at the department in social work said, no, we don't, social workers don't do therapy. So for another 5 years, I waited doing other things. And I worked as a social worker, and I realized that there were a lot of very deep problems that some people who were quite ill had, and they were psychological problems. A lot, actually, I worked in Cornwall in Ontario. There'd been a lot of people had been abused severely in their lives when they were children, and there's a correlation between physical illness and mental illness and abuse. Childhood experiences are very difficult. So then I became determined I'm going to get training I applied to the Jewish General Hospital program training family and couple therapist. And then when there was a public inquiry in Cornwall where I was working at the time about the sexual abuse that the systemic abuse in Cornwall, I decided that, okay, I'm going to just go and do psychotherapy now. I got my certificate as a marriage and family therapist, and I started to work for myself, and then late in life started doing psychotherapy full time. Sorry for that long. story.
Do you think that there are people working as a therapist who should have never gone to help other people in such way? Or
Yeah,
how
right.
do you determine somebody who's suitable for that path and somebody who should not do it?
Yeah. Monica, there's some people who really don't have much empathy for others. They have a sense of entitlement from the way they've, so the connection with people, it's harder for them to achieve. Um, the It's good though, and as having social work training, there are a lot of other jobs that social workers can do, policy, they can help people with forms, help people with the um, um, just the certain aspects, administrative aspects. They can be very good at that. They can, but people who want to be therapists, I think they really do need to care about people and be willing to learn and be willing to listen, not use, it's a power imbalance. A therapist client relationship, the therapist has more power, just as a doctor does, a psychologist does. They have more power, and we have to be aware of that power imbalance. And if we're not, we tend to abuse the power. It may be subtle, but it's going to affect the outcome of the work with the patient. So in that, embedded in that, is a person has to have some humility, I think, as an individual, and also be willing to learn new techniques, new approaches. It's a growing field. I've learned a lot in the last 4 years that I really was missing in my early training. That's been very helpful for the clients I work with. And so I think a willingness to learn rather than to just rest on the learning we did before and say, everybody has, this is personality theory, this is how people should be, this is how people should be treated a certain way, and you find it doesn't work with everybody. There has to be some humility and then say, okay, maybe I need to learn more in order to help this particular person. So I think a therapist who doesn't do that is not going to be doing a good job.
Now, for the last question, I will ask you a question what I have been asking everybody. If you could go back in time and give advice to your younger self, maybe when you were just graduating high school
Yeah,
or entering university, what
yeah.
would you tell yourself?
Oh my. Mm, Oh, that's a great question. Well, trust yourself. If you're really interested, Piret, in something, in this particular thing, find out how to get closer to it. Um, get information, research. Okay. It took me a long time to wake up as a person, to see what responsibilities I have to get information and that I've got a good mind, a good brain, but I have to give it the information so it can help me in a way. Um, what I would have wanted to know how I could calm my own anxiety when I was young, how I could uh, clinical hypnosis is so powerful. I wish I'd known some of those techniques of prior that, or I wish somebody had taught me so that I could have been happier, kind of more balanced in my approach, less avoidant when I was frightened. How to work with my emotions. I guess I wish I'd known more how important emotions are, but that there are ways that are effective and more productive to take that into account. I think one thing, I mean, my parents and my family, we were immigrants and refugees at the same time. There was a lot of, there was PTSD in our family. There was, my parents had their distresses from what happened. I didn't understand those things. I wish I had understood that I wish I'd understood that better. But also, I guess I wish I'd had some therapy when I was young. I think, and would have learned to listen to the promptings in myself. I think we all kind of know what we need, or can at least there's a glimmer of recognition when it's offered somehow. I wish I'd kind of known, but who would have helped me with that? I think, I don't know. I don't know.
One last follow-up question from that. What advice would you give to young people who feel lost or who don't know exactly what their place in the world is going to be? For
Yeah,
example, me, last year I was studying film production, now I'm in engineering science. I feel like I'm like always making
yeah.
such big like changes. So what advice would you give to people who don't exactly know what's going to be like, oh, that is what I'm going to do forever?
Try it out, learn more about it, say yes to it, find out about it, then make your decision. Maybe there's something else that I would rather be doing, and maybe I kind of see it. Follow that, get close enough to it, try it out, do your best in that field at the moment that or the period of time you're in it. So you really make an informed decision because it's true. Some people have a hard time to really know what they're destined for, I guess, or what they're really gifted for. We all have our gifts. We all, but yeah, I think we need more information. And sometimes people can't tell us what it's going to be like. We need to experience it ourselves and then validate, okay, what are our conclusions about our experience? Because it all helps in the end. It all helps in the end. You had another guest on your podcast early on. I was listening, and she too had like quite a kind of. It wasn't a straight line, but all that she learned in those different experiences or areas of life, she put it together in a really interesting way that was very effective. More power to her. More power to you.
Thank you, Piret. That was a really, really amazing and warm interview, and I'm really happy that we got to talk.
Thank you, Monica, for doing this. That's I really appreciate it.